Welcome to a special political edition of Surrey Live, where we are joined by Conservative candidate for the Police and Crime Commissioner elections in May, David Munro. Hello, David.
Hello, Paul. Thank you very much for inviting me on air. I'm looking forward to the next hour.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Now, David has an important meeting to attend, so I'll be keeping this to exactly an hour. But before we dive into questions that we've received from members of the public, David, could you just give us a minute or two about yourself, and your background, particularly in the public sphere?
Yes, of course. Well, I started off my career as an army officer in the Royal Engineers, served just under 20 years there, and came down to Farnham to take up a job in computer marketing. And I've been in Farnham, just south of Farnham, ever since. And I've also, more importantly, I've been a county councillor and a borough councillor in Waverley for nearly 20 years now. I represent Farnham South on the county. That's 12,000 residents. Really lucky to be selected, and I've held on to that seat ever since. And at county, I've done a variety of jobs. I was deputy leader. I was responsible for transport. That was a hot seat. The environment, social services, and I've just stepped down from a 2-year stint as chairman of the county council, which is a civic role, but it's absolutely crucial background for what I'm now wanting to do as police and crime commissioner. As I really got around Surrey, met hundreds, thousands of people, and I think I can honestly say I know what makes our wonderful county of Surrey tick, or at least I don't know anybody who knows it better.
Well, I was going to say, I met you for the first time when you were the chair doing your various civic duties going around the county. You were here in Surrey Heath many times. I think the first time I met you was at the reopening of Bagshot Library.
Oh, yes, I remember that well, yes.
Yeah, and, so you must have seen a lot of the county in that 2 years.
Yes, and the overwhelming impression was the amazing amount of work the voluntary and charitable and public sector do. You don't hear about them all that often. They just get on with it. They don't complain. They do magnificent work. And going round and thanking them on behalf of the council, on behalf of residents, was actually what makes the job worthwhile. And I think you'll find if you talk to any other mayor and so on, they will say exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might say, after shortly finishing that stint, how you've managed to stay trim, because I know that you get, I've spoken to a few mayors who say when they finish their mayoral year, they put on a few pounds because of all the sandwiches they get.
Yes, it was a struggle at times. I get on my bike most weekends and try to repair the ravages of the week that way.
Yeah. Wonderful. Now, let's get straight to it. We have had a fantastic response on social media with some great questions from right across Surrey. So thank you to everybody who sent in the questions. Some people asked to remain anonymous. I think we've had 1 or 2 questions from serving police officers.
Yeah, sure.
So to make sure that we don't reveal anyone by mistake or inadvertently, I'm not going to read out any names at all. I'm just going to ask the questions as I receive them. I've not edited them in any way, so they might not read that well because some people's grammar are better than others. But I will read them exactly. I think we've had about 20 questions, so the response has been phenomenal. And somebody's just asked in the audience, will we be taking questions in the chat? On the live chat? Yes, we will. I want to give the people who sent the questions in prior to the broadcast priority, but if you put your questions in there and use the question tag, then we can put them up, and if there's time at the end, we will definitely get to those. And anything goes. If you want to ask David any question, he will try his best to answer it for you, but just please try to be polite, okay? Because I know that crime and disorder and policing can bring out some strong emotions in people. Try to be polite. David's here to answer your questions. So let's get straight to it. Okay, to your mind, why do you think you would make a good PCC or Police Crime Commissioner?
Thank you. That's a good first question. And we've covered it already because we've talked about my experience, especially in public service. I know what makes the county tick. I've met up with Surrey Police many times before, and also all the other public authorities. I really admire what they do. And so becoming a police and crime commissioner, I think, is a natural follow-on from my decades of public service. And obviously, I'm very much looking forward to assuming the role. There's an election to go through, and although I'm confident, you can never take anything for granted. And it's up to Surrey residents to have their say on that.
Wonderful. Okay. So the next question. How do you think the current PCC, Kevin Hurley, has performed in his first term?
Well, I'm afraid to say I don't think he's performed at all well. And it's not just me who's saying that. A lot of other people are saying that, and in particular, Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, HMIC. And there's been report after report, which is frankly been damning. And the latest one is the report on how Surrey Police treats vulnerable people with mental health issues and that sort of thing. The Surrey Police were rated inadequate. Out of over 40 forces in the country, only 4 were rated inadequate, the lowest grading, and Surrey Police was one of them. So there's an awful job of work to do. But could I make the point too that these reports have a common theme, and that's the police officer, support officer on the ground is doing a good job with the resources available to them. Their commitment is constantly praised, and I'm really pleased about that. It's at the middle and higher level, and the leadership, which they say is lacking. Lack of coordination, lack of drive, lack of seeing what the problems are early enough to do something about it. So that's the answer. I don't think he's done a good job, and I'm determined, of course, to do better.
I'm glad you made the point about the bobbies on the beat, so to speak.
Absolutely.
You know, I think, I mean, I'm somebody who's plugged into social media, and you know, I'm in contact with a lot of local residents who can't speak highly enough of our police officers and PCSOs who do incredible work.
I quite agree. We've all got our anecdotes of how we were given help beyond the line of duty by police officers, police community support officers, and others. Some of us also have bad experiences, and what the task is to eradicate the bad and make sure that good practice, courtesy, duty becomes absolutely universal throughout the force.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, we've had a couple of questions about PCSOs, and I'll try not to be repetitive. But can you tell us your stance on PCSOs? That is police community support officers.
Yes, it's very simple. I support PCSOs. I think they were an excellent initiative, and they're part of an overall team, and that's most important, but a very important part. For instance, in my local area, I constantly meet them. They tell me all about the low level policing issues, and they are an essential bridge to the community. Their numbers have been cut, I'm afraid, over the last year, quite substantially, and that is worrying, frankly. And I will be wanting to look at that in the wider context. The Surrey Police, their community focus is changing completely. They got a new program going called Policing in Your Neighbourhood, of which PCSOs will be very important indeed. And so they will still have a role, but I'm just querying, in view of the cut in numbers, whether that role needs to be beefed up. And that's one of the many things that are going to be in my in-tray post May the 5th. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now, the next question. Actually, it's part of the same question. They're basically saying that they feel that the PCSOs are underutilized in the community. but you've already covered that. Loads of police functions. Sorry, go ahead.
If I can say on that, I suspect throughout the country it's patchy. I know some PSOs personally who are working flat out and doing a wonderful job, and I can't seriously say that underutilised. But we need to make sure that the best practice, I made this point before, is spread around everyone so that everybody can aspire to the highest standards, which I know exist.
I mean, police resources is no secret are low, and I think that the PCSOs, and I'm just talking from personal experience here, we like to see a presence, a police presence on the street. Talking to our young people in the town centres, that type of thing. And I think that
absolutely
the PCSOs actually give us that presence. And our uniformed police officers can then go out and deal with the more serious crime. You mentioned low-level crime earlier.
I think that's you hit it in a nutshell. Yeah. They are an essential tier of our police force, and I'd be very sorry indeed to see their role further downgraded.
And it's interesting that when the role was first created, there was a lot of cynicism in the community about PCSOs and that they were there to replace police officers. Actually, it's interesting. Yes, it's interesting now that people are very supportive of them, and that's not the case at all.
Yeah. No, there was cynicism. I think there's bound to be when you sort of jump into the unknown like that, and in particular that they would take responsibility away from the sworn officers, the police officers. But I don't think that has happened. They have actually enhanced and added to policing, and now they're very firmly part of the armoury of policing and fighting crime. And I think we should all get round and support them. I'm sure we do, actually. They are immensely popular and deservedly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now, next question is quite important, I think, because the existing PCC has expressed support for merging Surrey Police with a neighbouring police force such as Surrey or Hampshire. I think Sussex, beg your pardon.
Sussex, yes.
So this question, loads of police functions have been pooled, such as traffic and major crime. What's the option to a fully merged Surrey and Sussex police?
Well, I would need a lot of convincing before I thought that a full merger between, let's say, Sussex and Surrey Police happened. I think the county is proud of its police force with all its faults, and I think there should always be a Surrey Police force with a Surrey Police cap badge, signs on the cars, and so on. Because I think a proud county like Surrey needs its own police force. After all, there are 1.2 million residents there, and it's quite a large police force. But of course, that doesn't mean that we should amalgamate back office functions, more specialist functions, for instance, cybercrime, which is growing, so that we can be as efficient as possible. And I'd like to look much more at two areas there. First of all, the Metropolitan Police. We talk a lot about merging with Hampshire, Sussex, the other more rural forces, but actually the most important police service on our boundaries is London. There's no question about that. And I've been hearing that relationships are not as good as they could be across the board there. So I want to look closely there. And the other thing is, why should we reserve merging back office functions amongst police forces? There are other very good public sector organisations within Surrey doing some of the same thing. The administrative functions are not that different. The county council, of course, who I know well, all the district councils, the judicial services, coroners, etc., the fire service. Why can't we try and work more closely with them? Some good work is being doing. I don't want to gloss over that, but I think we can do even better. So I hope that's the right answer. No to complete merger. Yes to working much more closely.
I think it's disappointing to hear you say that the relations between Surrey and the Met have been strained. That's news to me. The thing is that we know that a lot of the crime that occurs in Surrey, particularly burglaries, that type of thing, these are organised gangs coming from outer areas, perhaps from London and that type of thing.
Yes.
It's very important that our police service have good relations with neighbouring forces.
Very much so.
For intelligence gathering and that type of thing. So I see it as a failure of the leadership if that is the case.
I think so. And again, the theme is so constant. At the sharp end, sort of the desk sergeant level, if you like call it, the relationships are good, and intelligence is shared on a day-to-day basis, I understand pretty well. So that when a gang of criminals sets out from South London to come to a Surrey area, then the intelligence, broadly speaking, is good, so that they can be intercepted. And actually, this very topic came up at a crime summit in Farnham last night. I'm talking about the more strategic side. Is there a really good plan of cooperation between the Metropolitan Police and Surrey Police? I'm sure there is, but I'm hearing from police officers themselves, senior police officers, things could be improved. Right. And I think that's one of the jobs of a police and crime commissioner, is to look outward. A chief constable obviously runs the force, has to look inward so much of the time. But my job would be to establish much better relationships with the people from whom we really need to work much closer indeed.
And you can make that easy through policy, and just with the policy of the Surrey Police to make sure that you make those relationships, inter-service communication easy. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Wonderful. Next question. I've been told on a number of occasions that the police seem to not value the unique views, opinions, or insights of PCSOs. We're back on PCSOs again. Into the community and its residents, especially in regard to young people, often undermining their recommendations, thus devaluing the position in the community. I mean, I'm not sure whether that's a question, but perhaps you could just make a quick comment on
I think we've covered a lot of that. To say again, for people who may have just joined us, I'm firmly in favour of police community support officers. They are essential link to the community. I know for a fact that many, if not all of them, pay particular attention to young people who frankly are a very hard to reach group. Paul, you and I, we really were young once. We just wanted to get on with our lives, have fun, start a career and all the rest of it. We weren't worried about policing. So it's up to the police to communicate with them. That's very important.
And I think that our young people who are very switched on know the difference between a PCSO and a sworn police officer. And I think are probably more likely to communicate, let's say, more freely with a PCSO than they would perhaps with a police officer. So an essential conduit in the community, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and I'm struck by the nature. All young people are at school or college or have just been there, and I know the police are really keen on getting into the schools and into our universities and our colleges, and I'd want to see much more of that happening, because the way to find out what people think is to go to them, not have them come to you. Because if I've done a lot of knocking on doors in the past, and I relish the thought of being able to go to people and find out on the spur of the moment, they're not expecting me, exactly what they think. I get an honest answer. It's not something sometimes an answer I want to hear, but that's part of the process, and that allows me to really find out what people want. And for young people, that's absolutely crucial.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. Now, a very good question, I think, and quite topical at the moment. Should all police officers be armed?
It's a simple question, and I give a simple answer. No, they should not. Our police forces nationally are unique, I think, in the world. They are not armed. They feel passionately that they shouldn't be armed as a matter of routine, and I feel the same way. Now, that's not to say, of course, unfortunately, we live in a very turbulent, uncertain world. I don't need to dwell on that. We all know the problems. There has to be a beefed up capability that needs to be used quickly and effectively to deal with terrorist threats and so on. Nobody would deny that. And so that, of course, has to happen. But I would not like to see policemen walking around the streets routine with guns in holsters. That's not British. It's not effective. And the police themselves will say that. And it's not right.
Yeah, and I think that if we do routinely arm all our police officers, some of the criminals will feel that they need to routinely arm themselves, and
absolutely,
we only have to see what happens in America. So that's not, we don't want that in the UK, do we?
I really don't think so. But of course, the government are right. They put a lot of extra investment in recently, millions and millions, to beef up our capability, more training, better weapons, and above all, a better speed of response. Because a terrorist is not going to wait for armed police. We've got to be there. We've got to be in there straight away.
Absolutely. Okay. Next question is, I feel that Kevin Hurley has not done anything of note whilst he has been PCC. Just my opinion. I've been following closely the career of Katie Bourne, PCC for 6, who interacts with her public and police force daily. She doesn't just talk, she actually practices what she preaches. When you are PCC, will you make sure we know everything that is involved in the job you will be doing?
Well, thank you. I don't want to personalise this, but I think a new police and crime commissioner needs to do much more, and I've covered that already. I know Katie. She, in fact, is my mentor, because experienced PCCs each take candidates under their wing. I'm meeting her next week. In fact, she's done a fantastic job as Sussex PCC, and if I can do as well as her, actually, I want to do even better than her. But I'll be very pleased indeed.
Okay. That's great.
I think I probably missed. What was the last part of that question? I'm conscious I've not answered it.
When you are PCC, will you make sure we know everything that is involved with your job and what you'll be doing? So I think that what that person is saying is, will you effectively communicate with residents about your activities and so on? Absolutely.
I'll make 2 points first. Communicating with over 1 million residents is difficult. I know that, but that's a reason for really making it a priority. And secondly, some operational details are very sensitive indeed. And I've had expressions of nervousness by some people who are saying we're giving out too many details of our operations. And as well as telling residents, you're also telling criminals that. So there's always that proviso. But the fundamental is a police and crime commissioner, his main job is to hold the police to account and to represent residents to the police. And how can he or she do that without having a clear idea of what residents think? And so it'll be one of the fundamentals, not just to have what they call crime summits, where people come along to you. They're important too, and I've been to a few, but to go out where people are. I've talked about schools, colleges, universities. I'd really like to get into them to find out. But there are so many organisations, community organisations in our county, residents associations by the score, for instance, all doing brilliant work. And I'd like to get there. Incidentally, one thing that came up last night at this crime summit was the fact that the police were drawing back from attending meetings of really important organisations. And I can understand the constraints on their time. Of course, they've got to make sure that they're effective. But that worried me I think the police should be there much more. And again, and I know that police officers, many police officers think exactly the same as they've told me that. And so I'd be wanting the police officer and the PCSO and support officers actually to be out there in the community as much as they possibly can.
Right. And I notice, as somebody, I'm a social media professional, I notice you're very active on social media. The very fact that you're here on this blab doing this, and I would hope that should you be elected, would continue, because I think these types of ways of communicating with residents is very effective. I mean, we've had 72 people through this broadcast. Members of the public. We had 20 odd questions. You know, there's clearly an appetite for a public facing PCC.
Oh, very much so. Well, all the range. Social media, of course, it's changing rapidly, and it will change further. And everybody I know, I think, uses it to a certain extent, and it will become more and more important. And someone like me and someone like the police force generally have really got to be up to speed on that. Apart from anything else, it's quite fun. Meeting friends in a casual, informal, formal way is sometimes much better than having to go out on a cold and windy night. Yeah. But I don't want to stress that too much. We need to use the full range of all the communications at our disposal.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. Next question. What would your plans be for neighbourhood policing being brought back to the forefront of Surrey's communities? At one time, a lot of resource was thrown at this type of policing, and now it's been completely taken away. And that is a concern of mine, actually.
Yeah. I've heard that many times, particularly, I think, in rural areas. That's not to say that towns don't have their problems too. Of course they do. But the very nature of rural areas means you're further away. That defines a rural area. And I'm told that the police have, to a certain extent, drawn back from that. They've got a great new reorganisation going on at the moment. It's called Policing in Your Neighbourhood. Now, if that works, then I think it will be a great improvement over what's going on at the moment, because the whole idea is that police officers are much more responsive to reports, and if you get one police officer coming to you, perhaps because you've been burgled, then he or she is going to stay on the case and maybe right up to the court. So there won't be this handoff to large numbers of people, so you don't know who you're dealing with. And that's one example of an initiative which sounds great in principle. I do have worries, though, that it's a very big ask for individual police officers, and I'm not convinced we've got the training and support in place. So I'll be watching that very closely indeed. And I'm also hearing that it means that you've got less flexibility if there's a real major incident. It's more difficult actually to pull people off to deal with something that's really important. So the idea is okay, happy with that. Nothing to do with money, incidentally, I was told. But I'm worried about it actually in practice. Nothing to do with me until the 5th of May, after which it's rolled out. But obviously we'll be needing to watch it very carefully indeed.
Okay, wonderful. Next question. What can you bring to the party that the outgoing PCC didn't, or is it more of the same? And I should clarify, the question says outgoing PCC. That's not necessarily the case. It is a small matter of an election to get through. But yeah, I'll take the point. And if you could answer that.
Yes, of course. Well, it certainly won't be more of the same. I may look like Mr. Hurley, but I'm not at all the same person he is. I've covered it to a certain extent, and that's my background in public services generally, and specifically county services, means that I will be, I think, much more instinctively giving a greater priority to the needs of county residents. It was quite interesting. I went to this crime summit yesterday, and there was a lot of good stuff talked by people at the top table, and the honesty and the duty of police came through. But there was not nearly as much, I thought, about responding to residents' priorities. You can't please everybody all the time, and you are doomed to failure if you try. But what you can do is identify the main things that residents are concerned about and do your damnness through the budget to satisfy. I can promise, I think I can truly promise that from my background and how I think it should be run, that you will see a different police and crime commissioner, one I hope who is more outgoing, one who is more responsive, and one who is there not to defend the police, but to hold the police to account and represent residents. It's going to be a very big task. It's a formidable job. I'll need a bit of help, but I'm pretty confident that I can do it.
Okay, fantastic. Funds will be less, I presume, but demands will be higher. What is your plan to get around this?
Right. Well, yes, Surrey Police, like every organisation in the country, will never have enough money to do everything it wants. But actually, George Osborne recently promised that for the next few years, police funding will stay the same in real terms. Now, not many organisations are in that happy position. So I think funding will be a constraint always, but much less of one. The answer is not to keep raising taxes. I'm not against, I'm not in favour of raising the police precept to council taxpayers substantially. But the answer, of course, is to work more efficiently. Reducing back office cost by amalgamations within the county and outside it, a relentless use of the very latest technology. Surrey Police have started that. I'm very pleased to say, but there's way more to go on that. And it's to make every police officer, every support officer work more efficiently. Now, that's easy to say. It's much harder to do, as you've got to break down the barriers. The view is we've always done it this way, and therefore we want to continue. Very natural. We're all guilty of that. But it's the job of the forces leaders, and that includes myself, to make quite sure that attitude is swept away.
Okay, lovely. Next question. We've already answered that. It's about the merger, so I'm not going to go on to that. We, the public, perceive that we need to see more officers on the ground. Is this possible? And if not, how can you reassure us of our safety? It's a similar sort of question, but yeah.
Yes, it's a very natural question, and again, one I've heard repeatedly. It's absolutely crucial that police force are seen. Police community support officers play a vital role in that. Police officer numbers have been cut quite substantially in Surrey, although I'm glad to say they seem to be on an even keel now. And I'm impressed by the attitude of some of the divisional inspectors I meet, that they have got this. They know police should be seen, should be heard, and they should be out there. And it's a case of making sure that attitude is widespread. There will be times when police have to concentrate. If there's a public order issue, then there's got to be flexibility to put the maximum number of officers, the maximum amount of policing force in where it's needed. But people accept that, of course. If there's a major incident, everything changes. But we need to get into the DNA, really, of our Surrey Police, that they're there to serve the residents. Nearly all of them know that already, of course, and to be out there responding to their concerns. Could I tell you a little story, actually? I went to a briefing on the new policing model just before Christmas, and there was an anecdote of someone who rang 999 in the middle of the night when their pipes had burst, and how wrong that was. And amongst the audience, there was a bit of tut-tutting, how stupid this person was, etc. And of course, 999 is not the right thing to do. Nobody argues that. But I actually thought that, well, only in England could the police be looked on as somebody who could help. If you were in Venezuela or something like that, police mean trouble. You don't contact them unless something goes wrong seriously. And so it's a sort of backhanded compliment, actually, to the police. Most people think they're there to help, and we must not lose it. At the same time, please don't call 999 if your pipes burst. There are better ways of doing it, and we've got to publicise those ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's astonishing that people are still misusing the 999 system like that, despite all the publicity that we all know what we should ring 999 for. But yeah, incredible that still goes on. Next question. Okay, now I'm not sure whether this is really down to you, but perhaps you might want to comment on it. Are the courts handing out the right sentences to criminals in Surrey? And if not, what can you do about it? I'm not sure there is anything you can do about it, but go ahead.
The judiciary are absolutely independent of the police, and that's completely right. I think they've probably got it about right. We can all read about sentences which we think are too low in individual cases, and I would absolutely go along with that. But I'm not picking up any really widespread general unease on that. There's a saying that hard cases make bad law, and I'd be a little reluctant to go down the route of increasing sentences all round, if only because it sort of normalises, in a sense, the really serious crimes. Surrey's got a very high prison population. Actually, it's more than average, and there's some very wicked people indeed who are quite rightly locked up, and they need to stay locked up for a long time. I'm just as interested in the rehabilitation of offenders, the whole idea of helping victims, and crucially stopping younger people getting into the criminal justice system in the first place. Right. I'm afraid prisons are very bad places to be. They are staff colleges of crime. And once you've served a sentence, the reoffending rate is just sky high, far too high. And so if people can be cut off at the pass, as it were, then we're all going to benefit, not just the offender, the potential offender, or the community generally, but actually the potential victims. They'll never know that they're not victims, of course, but actually that's one of the ways to reduce crime. But don't get me wrong, if people commit serious crimes, they're in for serious punishment.
Let's get them banged away. Absolutely. Okay, next question. Why do you, and I think you've kind of answered this, but perhaps you might want to go into it a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Why do you want to do this most difficult of jobs?
Very, very, very interesting. Sometimes I ask myself that too, but no, I'm very clear. I've been in public service now for decades, doing a variety of jobs. I've outlined my experience. I know the county. I know its public services. I also know that there's a job to do in policing. Police and crime commissioners are on the political map now. They're on the policing map. They play a crucial role. I think I'm well equipped to do that. And on a personal level, I think it will be great fun. All difficult jobs are fun. I like working. I like facing challenges, and I would like to face this one.
And I think that often, I mean, I'm a borough councillor, and often people say to me, "Oh, why do you do it?" And don't get me wrong, it does have its frustrations, but at the same time, I actually, I'm sure you're the same, David. I mean, I'm in my second term now. Get a lot of satisfaction out of helping people. And
Absolutely.
when you're at a level like a PCC, that is at such a, you touch many people's lives through our police force.
Of course, and so many times you can actually see that you're doing good. Sometimes it's very frustrating. Paul, you're as a counsellor, you'll know the feeling. What have I achieved this week? Lots of activity, but what outcomes? And that's frustrating. But actually, most weeks there's outcomes too.
Yeah, absolutely. And some that you've worked on months or even years before come to fruition. Unfortunately, with the council, and probably the same with the police, to get things done can take an incredible amount of time. But when it happens, it's fantastic.
Absolutely, yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question. Now, this is a very good question and very relevant as well. What is your view on the idea of merging the fire service with the police?
Right. Well, I've made my views public on that. First of all, not everybody may know where we are on that. The government, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, floated the idea last year. A consultation paper was issued before I was involved in this, and that's now being analysed. But only last week, the government said that they were bringing forward a bill soon to allow communities such as Surrey actually to go forward with complete merger. And so that will be on the table. I take a middle course. I don't share the Fire Brigades Union's outright condemnation of it, because I think there's a lot of merit in looking at it, but neither do I say we should rush headlong into that. Both those, in my view, extreme views are wide of the mark. I think potentially it offers a lot of financial savings, and it means that the crux is that residents will get a better service from if the two uniform services are merged. That's a potential. But I also see that merging two services, although they're both uniform, proud services, are very different in culture, could be a real problem, and that it will cost money. And what could happen, the bad thing, would be each service would stay the same, but there would just be an extra level of command and bureaucracy, slowing up the process and costing a lot of money. So we've got to do it carefully. I'd like to see it led from the front, really. I was at Guildford Fire Station just before Christmas, and I was having a look at their defibrillators. That's the machine that goes over your heart when you have a heart attack and restarts it. Routine for ambulance crews, of course, but now the fire and rescue service carry defibrillators as a matter of routine. They've been properly trained and all the rest of it. Great unease about that to start with, but I was told by the rescue service that it's working really well. So my thought was, well, shouldn't we investigate Surrey Police having that? There are implications to that, of course, training and all the rest of it. But let's look at that much more closely. And that's the kind of merger that, in principle, I'd like to see, so that the person who is in trouble, however it is, gets the full force of the uniform services, whatever they are, to help. So it's a live issue. It's not going to go away, rightly so, and I'm glad it's been raised. I'll look at it, but let's just be a little careful at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, somebody in the comments, and we'll just keep this very short, but somebody in the comments has put that they would be in favour of paying a small fee towards policing and the fire and so on, say just £2 per month. You already do that for your council tax, but point taken. Just thought I would answer that anyway. Right, next question. What is the balance between safeguarding teams, including historical child sex abuse and rape allegations, and public-facing patrol staff? So I think that what they mean by that is a lot of resource going into historical stuff, like, for instance, Operation whatever it was called with Jimmy Savile and all those people, and the drain that has on our forward-facing police force, our frontline cops.
Yeah, no, this is a difficult one. If it were easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I did feel very sorry for Field Marshal Bramall, who I met in my army career, who had these completely wild allegations of historical abuse hurled against him, wasn't able to respond, left dangling for over a year. Absolutely wrong. But at the same time, if these allegations are true, in other cases, they're not in his case, then they've got to be investigated. A bishop of Chichester, who's now in prison, he was allowed to abuse boys for decades. And simply wasn't investigated. And that's the kind of person who should not be let off the hook, whereas other people should. A very careful balance. I've got a feeling that there's an essential element sometimes missing, and that is halfway through a process, when it has been investigated, somebody independent of the investigation team needs to say, well, hang on, is there a case that stacks up? And if in their opinion it doesn't, then they should have the courage to call a halt. Easy to say. It's very easy for me to say that. It involves some very serious crimes and very seriously damaged people. But I think we need a review, a national review. It's not just a Surrey problem by any means at all, to get that balance right. Okay. I do think police and crime commissioners possibly have a role there, because with the best will in the world, police officers on the case do rightly get very bound up in what they're doing. Of course they do, and it's right that they should. You need someone who could be able to perhaps take a more objective view, but I'm not pretending it's an easy one at all, and never will be.
Okay. Thank you. We've touched upon armed police, but this is from a slightly different angle. Should we be reviewing Surrey's armed response capabilities in light of the decision by the Met? So that was the Metropolitan Police announced that they will be increasing their armed presence on the streets of London.
Of course, the answer is yes, and especially now we've got this extra funding nationally to do that. Then there is clearly a case for reviewing it. I will say I don't want to know the details, and neither should anybody else. Because revealing the details of what actually is going on will not just help residents, it will help terrorists. Some things rightly are kept under wraps, and they should stay that way. But yes, of course there would be a review. I think to be fair, I think it is going on. I know it's going on anyway. And in this dreadful world, sometimes, then it's absolutely right that should be. But that should not lead to routine arming of police on the streets.
Fair enough. Okay. I'm going to ask a question from the audience. So, and interestingly, I met this lady yesterday for the first time, Helen Kamak. She is in the Woking area. And I'm going to give her a little plug as well before I answer a question. She runs this incredible community email social network. It's brand new, called Interest Me. If you're a community group or involved with a community group, check this out, because I think this will be of great interest to you. So Helen Kamak's question is, and she put this in the chat earlier on, David, what do you see as the role of local neighbourhood watches in relation to crime and policing?
Thank you, Helen. I see their role as absolutely crucial. And it's not just me saying that. It is, to be fair, Surrey Police as well. The statistics are clear. Where there's a local neighbourhood watch, there is less, on balance, there is less crime. And that has to be the touchstone. And so it's the efforts of local people, and especially the coordinators. They do a difficult job, a time-consuming job, and an unpaid job. They really need to keep up with the good work. Could I make a plug, since we're in the Waverley area? Surrey Police are desperately looking for a Waverley coordinator of local neighbourhood watches. It's an unpaid job. I hope that doesn't put too many people off. A very responsible one.
But enormously rewarding.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I suspect they're looking for another equivalent of Helen Kamak. And so if there is anybody out there who would like that, give me a call, and I'll put them in touch with the right people. Police do support it generally. I hope on the ground, individually, neighbourhood watches are feeling that they get the right support from individual officers. If they think they're not, they need to do something about it, because I'm fairly convinced the leadership of Surrey Police, their hearts are in the right place, but sometimes things do get a bit blurred around the edges.
Right, fair enough. Now, we're doing really well on time, because there's been a couple of repeat questions. There's a hell of a lot. I should just stress this: hell of a lot of questions about PCSOs, and I'm actually getting direct messages on my Facebook and Twitter, and some text messages from people. An enormous amount of support for PCSOs. That's very interesting. And hopefully you might take that away with you, David.
I will definitely take that away. What is important to residents is important to me. I hope I don't sound too bland saying that, but I really, really mean it.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so this is actually the last question that I have. Now, if there's anybody in the audience, because we've done well on time, if there's anyone in the audience, we've had 79 people viewing this, which is fantastic. But if there's anyone in the audience who has a question, type it in the chat there, and I'll do my best to read it out before we wrap this up at 1:30. So the last question I have is, I'd like to know how exactly he will represent the views of Surrey residents. What is his plan for seeking their opinions? What tools and tactics will he use to make sure he listens to a full range of views from across Surrey? I think that's a fair question.
I think that's a very fair question, in the heart of a PCC's job. Again, to start with, it's difficult. Consulting residents, and I've done it for decades. You think that you've got the views of everyone, but you haven't. So you've just got to keep plugging away at it. There's no magic bullet. Social media, I think my appearance here shows that I'm as alive as anyone. That will become more and more important, so that people can give their views easily. I'm wanting to continue the series of crime summits, which are a formal meeting in every borough for people to the views. But I also want to get in to go to people where they are. Schools, colleges, universities, the myriad of community groups. Everybody has an AGM. I can't go to all of them, but I'd certainly like to go to lots of them. Give me a slot so that you can tell me what's important. Neighbourhood watches, of course, that's just come up. The residents' associations, local authorities, parish councils, all those. No one channel. We've just got to keep at it and spend a lot of time. I'll tell you one thing I'm not intending to do, and that's push out a series of glossy newspapers. I don't think they work terribly well.
I agree.
Anybody puts a leaflet through my door, I usually think they're a pizza place, and having said that, I intend to put lots of leaflets through residents' doors over the next 3 or 4 months, which I hope will be read. No, but there's nothing like personal contact, and that's what I hope to do as much as possible. And at the end of the day, end of 4 years, residents will judge whether I've done it right or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I will offer you, if you do get elected in May, is that when you come to Surrey Heath, at the very least, I will live stream your crime summit over the internet, so those who can't make it can at least watch it live or watch a recording afterwards. So if you connect with me before you do that, I'll make sure that that happens. And Valerie White in Bagshot.
Hello, Valerie.
You know Valerie. Yes, you know Valerie. We mentioned the opening of Bagshot Library earlier that you attended in your role as chairman of Surrey County Council. Well, Valerie was heavily involved with that. And she puts in the comments there, the crime summits must be personal to each area, not the same old it is now.
I absolutely agree. There's no one. People are interested in policing in their neighbourhood, the policing amongst their friends and their community, and so policing should be local at that level. Of course, there needs to be a county and a national focus as well. Everybody would agree there. But people will go out to a crime summit to hear about what's going to happen to them personally. So thank you, Valerie, for reminding me, if it comes to it, to keep it local at these sort of occasions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we are out of questions, unless somebody in the audience would like to ask another question. If I may, David, to sum up, could you just maybe give us a minute or two just to remind people why on May the 5th they should vote for you as their police and crime commissioner?
Thank you for that. I hope they do. My experience in public services, my knowledge of Surrey, my experience in communicating, listening to residents, makes me a very good person indeed to fulfil the primary job of a police and crime commissioner, which is to represent the residents of Surrey and hold the police to account. I'll promise you certainly a lot of effort. I promise you a lot of commitment, because I truly believe a police and crime commissioner's job is really, really important and directly leads to better policing. And so I hope I will convince you of that over the next 3 or 4 months of the campaign. And I look forward, of course, to meeting thousands, tens of thousands of residents to actually engage with you in person. And can I start that off by saying, I'm glad so many people are listening in. If they want to do any follow-ups, they know exactly where I am. And I'd be very pleased to answer questions, of course, offline.
Yeah. Let me just point people to your social media channels. So you have your own Facebook page, which I've just put in the comments there for our live listeners and watchers. And that is facebook.com/David4Surrey. And that's the number 4. David4Surrey. I would recommend that residents like that page so you can follow the campaign and see what David is up to, because undoubtedly when he goes across all the communities in Surrey, things will crop up, and hopefully he will communicate those via his Facebook page and Twitter, because, you know, communities across Surrey are not actually that different from each other. We more or less face the same sort of issues. There are some differences. For instance, rural areas may have differences to urban areas, but in the main, we have the same sort of problems. And it'll be nice to hear what David has to say via his social media channel. So I would definitely recommend that you follow that. So that's facebook.com/David4 for Surrey. And your Twitter address, David, is David J. Munro. So that's at David J. Munro, and Munro is spelt MUNRO for the benefit of the people listening to the audio only.
And I have a website as well.
Okay, and what is that?
The website is David4Surrey, the figure 4.org.uk.
Wonderful. David, thank you so much for taking part in this special political edition of Surrey Live. Hopefully, if you're elected, you will take part in many more of these. It's a really good way of communicating with the community, and I think it's greatly appreciated. I mean, like I say, we've had 81 people watching this live, which is phenomenal, particularly at the time of day, midday when people are at work, but also that a large proportion of Twitter is down right now. Didn't want to say that earlier to frighten you, but yeah, unusually a large portion of Twitter is down at the moment, so that could be causing us a few problems. I suspect had it been fully functional, we might have had quite a few more. But it's been a fantastic broadcast. Really enjoyed it. Always good to talk to you, and the best of luck with your campaign.
Can I have the last word?
Of course.
By saying thank you very much indeed for inviting me. I hope if anybody's watching this at work, they don't get into trouble. And I'm really, really pleased, and I appreciate having been able to answer probably some of the questions in people's mind. Give me a call, and I'll see what I can do. And many thanks again, Paul, and to the Residents Network.
Thank you very much.